Hello guys, welcome all of you to today's Farmcast. And guys, in today's session, I'll primarily talk about the second half of antimicrobial drug resistance. In the first half, I talked about the intrinsic mechanism. That means a mechanism that is present in a particular bacterium from its birth, right? Whereas acquired resistance is something the bacteria they learn to live along with the antibiotics. So there are four particular mechanisms in acquired resistance. Number one, see, to kill a bacteria or to inhibit its replication, the drug has to enter into the bacteria, right? So number one, there could be a decreased entry, and this is primarily in gram negatives because of a complex LPS, lipopolysaccharide outer membrane, which does not allow a lot of antibiotics to enter, for example, penicillin G. Second one is there could be a decreased entry, could be because of LPS outer membrane, which is a complex structure. Second, there could be a decreased amount of porins in these gram negatives. For example, in Pseudomonas enterobacter, they can develop resistance to carbapenems. Gonorrhea has already developed resistance to penicillin because of this mechanism. So this first mechanism, guys, decreased entry, is specific for your gram negative organisms. Second mechanism, there could be drug efflux, and even drug efflux that can be seen here. It is primarily a chromosomal, it is due to chromosomal encoded genes, and it is also specific for gram negatives mostly, like Pseudomonas, E. coli, Gonococcus. They have developed resistance, right? So these first two mechanisms, they are specific for gram negatives. That is, so remember, for gram negatives, the specific mechanisms are when there is a problem where the antibiotic is not allowed to enter, or if it enters, it is kicked out. That is, it undergoes efflux. Right? The other mechanisms, the third and the fourth, which I'm going to discuss, these two mechanisms, the third and the fourth, they would be seen with both gram positive and negative organisms. For example, number three, guys, what I do is called as target modification. So wherever the drug is going to act, I'm going to change that target in the bacteria. It can be an enzyme, it can be a receptor, right? For example, in case of gram positive, the most important example is Staphylococcus aureus. And what can happen is staph changes the penicillin binding protein, and that gives us MRSA or methicillin resistant Staph aureus. And because penicillin binding protein has changed, it cannot bind to any of those beta lactams, right? Okay, so beta lactams become ineffective in MRSA except one, that is your fifth generation cephalosporin, ceftaroline. It can be used, right? Second example is vancomycin. See how the target changes. The D-ALA terminal changes from D-ALA to D-ALA D-lactate. So one alanine molecule changes to lactate, and hence even vancomycin cannot bind to D-alanine because there is no D-alanine, and which gives rise to VRSA, vancomycin resistant Staph aureus. There is second variant called as VISA, vancomycin intermediate Staph aureus, and guys, VISA is because of increased thickness of the cell wall, right? So this is something they can ask in your exams. Third, specifically drugs acting upon protein synthesis, there can be an altered ribosomal structure. An altered ribosomal structure, like in case of aminoglycosides and linezolid, there could be an altered structure of the binding site for aminoglycoside in the 30S subunit, linezolid in the 50S subunit. Fourth, the ribosomes, they can produce protective proteins. So it is seen with tetracycline. So what the bacteria they do, they develop an envelope that will cover the ribosome, and your tetracycline they cannot bind. Fifth, there could be ribosomal methylation. So bacteria produces an enzyme called as methylase, and it methylates the binding site for mostly protein synthesis inhibitors, and it is usually seen with macrolides. Now, because of this particular thing, what happens is there is resistance to macrolides, because macrolide binding site on 50S ribosome, it undergoes methylation. Now remember, lincosamide like clindamycin and streptogramin B also bind to macrolide binding site. So what is the message I'm trying to give you guys? Think. If site for macrolide binding changes, even lincosamide like clindamycin or streptogramin B cannot bind to the target. So there would be resistance to 3 antibiotics: macrolides, lincosamide, streptogramin B. This is called as MLSB type of resistance. M macrolide, L lincosamide, SB is streptogramin B, right? There can be next one guys, DNA gyrase mutation. It's an easy one because of fluoroquinolones. Mutation of DHPS or DHFR mutation. DHPS is a target for sulfonamides, so sulfonamide resistance can be seen. DHFR target for trimethoprim, there can be trimethoprim resistance. So DHPS, that is dihydropteroid synthase, or DHFR dihydrofolic acid reductase mutation gives us resistance to anti-folate antibiotics. The last one here guys, RPOB gene mutation. RPOB gene, it codes for RNA polymerase in Mycobacterium, and that can give us resistance to rifampicin. So these are some examples where the target changes, and it can be seen with both gram positive and negative, right? The last one is guys, drug inactivation. Now how do I inactivate a drug per se? Number one is, what I can do guys is I can transfer a group. For example, acetyl group. I'll transfer an acetyl group, and that will bind to the antibiotic and inactivate it chemically, which can be seen with aminoglycosides, streptogramins, fluoroquinolones, right? So this is transfer of group. Second mechanism of drug inactivation, which is more important, it is breakdown of drug, and that is obviously because of production of enzymes. The most important one is, which is beta lactamase. And remember, beta lactamase production, it is the most common mechanism of resistance to beta lactams in gram negatives, and the most important one is called as ESBL, or extended spectrum beta lactamase. So one thing they can ask you, ESBL, right? A bacteria produces ESBL, that means it does not lose sensitivity, right? Which antibiotic sensitivity is not lost, or which would be the drug of choice for an ESBL producing organism? Your answer would be carbapenems, right? Because ESBL is a cocktail of enzyme which has penicillinase, cephalosporinase, monobactamase, but it does not have which enzyme? Carbapenems, right? The last point guys, which I would like to tell you here, is the latest one, New Delhi M1 or metallo-1 beta-lactamase. It is called as New Delhi metallo-1 beta-lactamase or NDM1 beta-lactamase. Now this is the severest form of beta-lactamase produced by bacteria, and those bacteria are called as superbugs, because this beta-lactamase, it carries information for enzymes which can destroy all the beta-lactams. It can destroy aminoglycoside, tetracycline, fluoroquinolone, all the antibiotics in this world will be blown away. So this is kind of a nuclear bomb, right? So what they ask you is, if you have an isolate a bacteria producing NDM1 beta-lactamase, in that case, what are the drugs you're gonna use, right? And we have two options guys. One is colistin, second one is tigecycline. I repeat, one is colistin, second one is tigecycline. So both of these are important MCQ points. So guys, this is what I had to discuss in the section of drugs today. So as I said, I'll be doing these farmcasts time to time, and I'll give you an opportunity for passive learning, right? So you use this farmcast when you are not actively doing something. For example, you are doing your brisk walking or jogging or cycling or whatever it is, right? You can just use it, plug in your headphones, and at least revise something. Something is better than nothing, isn't it? So guys, we'll come down to the last lap of farmcast, and as you know, I always discuss one of the doubts which or many doubts which students they ask me. And one student asked me, sir, what is the best thing to do in the last 10 days before this exam? I mean, what should I do? Should I revise my notes? Should I revise only the questions that I've done wrong, or what should I do? So guys, I tell you, it is a subjective thing. That means it differs from person to person, and you should do what you are more comfortable with and which will make you more confident going into the exam, right? I'll tell you about my view, right, about what I prefer. So you might not be the same person as me, you have to understand that. So guys, I am a person who is more, I was more invested in, I had more faith in my notes. The reason being, when I wanted to solve new questions, right, that is where I have to go, to the notes. So in the last 10 days, if I were in your place, what my focus would be is, in these last 10 days, I would try to revise briefly my subjects which are volatile: pharma, micro, biochemistry. I'll try to revise short subjects: skin anesthesia, radiopsychiatry, ophtha, ortho, ENT. And then I'd like to brush up one or two subjects which I'm weak in. For example, let us say I'm weak in medicine, so I would spend one day revising all the concepts of medicine. And by this time, one day I would give to images of micro, anesthesia, medicine, surgery. So I mean, that would be my approach. And obviously, I mean, it's not that I'll not practice MCQs. I'll do MCQ, but as minimum as possible, maybe 1 to 2 hours MCQs, so that, at the end of the day, the exam is MCQ based. So I would not miss out on practicing few MCQs. Again, as I said, it is highly variable. It differs from person to person, and you have to identify what kind of person you are. But remember, guys, you know that 1 or 2 questions here and there, and the rank changes drastically. You're even into the race or out of the race because of 1 or 2 questions. So the race is very tight, right? And these 10 days, they would be very deciding. Your anxiety level would be too high in these 10 days periods, and the thought will be coming, time and again into your head: what if, what if I don't make, I would have to go through this torture once again for the entire year, or God knows if the COVID looms around. So remember, I'll tell you one thing: if this anxiety is there, now it's a good thing. You know why? The reason being, you're anxious, you are in state of a fear. The reason being, you have invested so much into it. So just imagine a person who has not invested any time in studying. Will he be anxious because he knows he's not going to make it? But you're honest with your preparation. You have invested so much of time into it, and now you know that because you have invested so much, if there is no output, then you are nowhere. So it's kind of, if you have these feelings, try to understand that it's a good thing, and that you are honest with your preparation. And let me tell you something: if you had been honest with your preparation, an honest preparation always yields at least something. If you do not get MD, MS, you might get a diploma. If you don't get a diploma, you might get a DNB. Whatever it is, guys, right? Whatever it is, grab whatever you are getting and move on in life. A degree is not going to decide, right, what would be your future, what would be a clinician you would be, right? Irrespective of it is an MD, MS, DNB or diploma, you might have to face some kind of racism, medical racism among doctors in the beginning. But you will see as, what happens is, whenever a teacher teaches, it is not the other teacher who decides how good the teacher is teaching. Who decides it? It is the students. If the students accept me, whatever I am, I'm an MD, MS or DNB or diploma, how does it matter? The student has one expectation from me, that I teach the student well. The same thing happens in the clinical field. The same thing happens. The patient does not have to know you're a gold medalist or you know the concept of this disease or that. As long as you are able to listen to the patient and solve his problems, and he feels like coming back to you, and not only he or she, but bring all other people that he or she knows who has benefited from you. Now this is a human psychology. It happens. When you get benefited, you feel like others should also get benefited. So that is how your private practice is going to build up. And don't worry about these degrees and diplomas and DNBs, etc. guys. So that is my wish to all of you guys. And at last, I'll repeat the same thing. If you are honest with your preparation, it will yield at least something. That's all, guys. Take care. Bye-bye. Lots of love. This was Dr. Ranjan with you.